Good morning and welcome to Monday, October 11th, not November yet, October 11th. Welcome to BHC today. I'm Pastor Dave. Thank you for joining me for a few minutes. I want to continue on the theme of love in our time together on these Mondays, and would like to read a little bit further into the epistle of 1 John, John's letter to believers, and I'm going to begin this morning at John chapter 4, beginning at midway between just before verse 17 starts up. It's actually 16b. God is love. Those who are living in love are living in God, and God lives through them. By living in God's love, by living in God, love has been brought to its full expression in us so that we may fearlessly face the day of judgment, because all that Jesus now is, so are we in this world. Love never brings fear, for fear is always related to punishment, but love's perfection drives the fear of punishment far from our hearts. Whoever walks constantly afraid of punishment has not reached love's perfection. Our love for others is our grateful response to the love God has first demonstrated to us. Anyone can say, "I love God," yet have hatred toward another believer. This makes him a phony, because if you don't love a brother or sister whom you can see, how can you truly love God whom you can't see? For he has given us this command: whoever loves God must also demonstrate love to others. The word of the Lord, and we give thanks to God for that. A word comes to mind very quickly, having read that and having read regarding the fact that if we say we love God as followers of Christ and yet have hatred toward another believer, this makes us a phony. And on one hand, yeah, that makes total sense, and we believe that. We believe Holy Scripture. But then we think of the word forgiveness, which is really, really a tough word, in that part of loving God is living as a person who does forgive. And this is where challenge sometimes comes to our minds and our hearts. And I have heard folks say, "I just can't forgive him." And yet we recognize that love is a part of, that forgiveness is a part of the picture of love. And so just want to run a few thoughts by you for a moment. Forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness is an act in response to us knowing, as followers of Christ, what we ought to do. Sometimes we want to feel like we're forgiving first, as though we can change the inner workings of our spirit and our heart, when only God can do that. Sometimes we feel like we should not forgive until we feel different, because that would be false. Quite the opposite is true. We are called to act forgiving. And in that call to act forgiving, we also confess to the Father that we don't feel forgiving. We don't feel like that. We don't want to do that. And that's where He does His job. In time, that forgiveness, that lack of forgiveness in our feeling will change, because the healer of our personalities will change it because of who He is. He's the healer of our souls. But I don't feel like forgiving. You're not bound to that. What we are bound to is the call to act in love, to conduct ourselves in a way that it is loving in our action. We do have control of that. And seeing that we are able to forgive in action releases us to His healing power inside us, because I cannot change because of a decision I make. I cannot change the feelings that I may have. Only God can. So, when it comes to forgiveness, Jesus said we should forgive 70 times 7, and that's a lot. If called upon to forgive a lot like that, the time you will run into, if you haven't already, where your spirit doesn't quite go there. So I encourage you today to act forgiving, even when you don't feel like it. Something in our household we used to say is, I can't control how I act. I can't control how I feel, only how I act. I can't control how I feel, only how I act. As followers of Christ, it gives us the opportunity then to conduct ourselves as we know that He wishes for us to do. And then we confess to Him how we're feeling on the inside, and He comes to us, and in His time brings the healing to our hearts, that no longer our actions are in the way, and He brings healing deep inside. Is there someone today that you have had a hard time forgiving? In your heart, in your personality, in your feelings? I'd like to suggest that you make a verbal commitment, just aloud to God, that as a follower of Christ, you do forgive them, and you will commit yourself to act in a forgiving way, and then confess to Him that your heart is still hurting. You don't feel forgiving, and ask Him to come in and heal that place of hurt in your heart. Wonderful, wonderful passage of Scripture, reminding us that God is love. Again, anyone can say, I love God, yet have hatred, and really, we could put in parentheses, a lack of forgiving spirit toward another believer. John is pretty specific about this. And yet, as we've been talking about this amazing reality of God's love, the God who created the universe, the God who has created you and me, the God who brought to us and gave to us Jesus Christ so that we could be transformed and become more like His Son Jesus, the God, the creator of the universe, is still creating, is still healing. And so, in our hearts, when we come up against that, when we face a reality in our spirits that we do not feel forgiving, we don't want to forgive because of our hearts, we have the option to act forgiving, and He will change the course of our feelings inside by giving us ultimately a forgiving spirit, by allowing us from the inside to forgive, because in our actions we are already acting forgiving. God is our healer, and we are obedient to His instructions. Have a wonderful day. May it be filled with God's love, His grace, and His amazing favor in every way. God bless you. Bye now.